All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show. You one-stop shop for all things Commanders. It is the divisional round, and here to get us closer to the action is David Harrison, the host of Locked On Commanders podcast. David, what's happening, buddy?
What's up, man? How you been? How you been enjoying the season?
Oh man, I've been trying to not be too excited, but it's been hard. These cardiac commanders, the comeback commanders, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
them, they've just been finding ways to get it done. David, before we continue on that way, I wanted to congratulate you a little bit. For those that didn't know, last week probably was very interesting for you because you have covered the Bucks for a long time and
Yeah.
the Commanders. You're leaving the Bucks behind to do the Commanders on a more full-time basis. Congratulations on all the good things that are happening to you, buddy.
No, I appreciate you. Yeah, no, Commanders has definitely been full time now for a few years. It's just having to put all of my focus and energy into what I'm doing here, and hopefully growing what I'm able to do with my Washington coverage. Always looking to move forward and upward. So that was just the next logical step. So I appreciate you, though.
Absolutely. This win streak has been incredible, David. What to you has been the most eye-catching of what they've been able to do in this like 6-game stretch?
I mean, the fact that the only people that are surprised about it are the people outside the locker room and outside the building. You know what I mean? I've seen teams, you talk about those Buccaneers, players and even previous versions of this Washington franchise. Like I've seen teams win games or go on runs that nobody expected them to. And honestly, a lot of times you go in that locker room and you can tell they didn't expect themselves to, and they're surprised and they're enjoying it. I go back to that wild card win, man, and I came out of the press box expecting. I actually had my camera set up in the press box, so we're not allowed to film plays, right? We're not allowed to doing that stuff. But so once the game's over, it's game on, right? So I'm like, once that game winning kick goes through, I'm going to hit record and I'm going to get a capture from the press box view of the mayhem on the field and the celebration and everything else. And don't get me wrong, guys, we're obviously happy they came off the field and embraced Zane Gonzalez, and we're certainly happy, but it wasn't quite the explosion of emotion that I really expected it to be. And then I got into the locker room and I was like, man, like this is the same atmosphere we had like when the Commanders beat the Falcons in overtime, or when they pulled off that victory against the Saints and sealed that deal. And it just kind of hit me in that moment. Like this wasn't the major victory that, on the inside that it was on the outside. And I immediately went back to that 10-0 Philadelphia Eagles Monday Night Football matchup where the Commanders were able to beat the Eagles and ruin that party. And the locker room we walked into after that game, I mean, comparatively, you'd have thought that team just won the Super Bowl, right? And it just kind of goes to show you that, there is a perception of what a team is capable of, but that perception on the outside isn't always the perception on the inside. We already know that, but this is just kind of the most glaring example I think I have of that. So it was really impressive, honestly. Like it was very impressive because not just the lip service of we're not surprised, we know what we're capable of, all that stuff. Like you see it in the emotions that typically these players and coaches don't know how to hide that part. They don't realize, they know that we're reading them, but they don't realize we're reading them to that extent. So don't get me wrong, certainly a lot of happiness to get that wild card win, but no surprise involved in it. That's kind of what stood out to me all season long.
Who's got more to do with do you think Dan Quinn or Bobby Wagner?
I mean, I think there's credit to be given all over it. You know what I mean? And everybody's going to say it starts with DQ, but honestly, I think it really starts with Josh Harris. You know what I mean? Like it starts all the way at the top, and it starts with the entire ownership group. Like Magic Johnson. I mean, he sends a tweet after every game, and he sends tweets here and there. Putting his 2 cents in as he's entitled to, but he doesn't try to be overbearing. He doesn't try to be the most famous owner in this ownership group. You know what I mean? He lets everybody else, and he understands like Josh is here to manage the group. Josh is here to manage the franchise. I'm going to give my 2 cents, but other than that, I'm going to let the man do his job. And Josh came out, hired a GM in Adam Peters. And then from there, Adam Peters went out and found the right coach. It's not that Josh isn't interested or invested or involved in at least the conversations, but it's really an organization that's just all about getting the right people in the right place and letting everybody do what they need to do. So when it's time for the coach to take the reins and give, the speech or give the direction or whatever, Bobby has no issue with stepping back. When it's time for Bobby to take the reins and be the leader in the locker room and the coach on the field, Joe Witt Jr., Dan Quinn have no problem letting them do that. And you even go all the way down to Cliff Kingsbury, the Mr. Air Raid himself, who came out and multiple times this season, but specifically this week, talked about how much he's learned from Dan Quinn and how much sometimes Dan has to kind of keep him in check from his own, I don't know if you want to call them demons, but right, his own pass happy tendencies. And it just kind of shows you like when you have the chemistry and you have the culture of we're all trusting each other to do our jobs and we're all trusting each other to be at our best, it just kind of bleeds through.
Adam Peters was with the 49ers, was with Denver when they won a Super Bowl, the Patriots when they were winning Super Bowls. What is it that you've seen from Adam Peterson so far that maybe not impresses you the most, but
Yeah.
just it's nice to have that kind of guy in the building. And then at the same time, remember that this is year one for Adam Peters. This is probably the worst the roster will ever look, David.
What really impresses me about AP is he knows who he is. He knows what this team wants to be. He knows what he and DQ want this team to be, and he's not willing to compromise that. You know what I mean? And it's interesting. You look at his history and say, man, he's won or he's been part of a winning culture everywhere, but he's also been a part of a culture in New England where it was all about the head coach. It was all about the quarterback, right? But here in Washington, it's not all about the quarterback, and it's not all about the head coach either. Like the coordinators, run their own ships. They run their own schemes. The position coaches definitely have a voice in the room, whereas like with Bill Belichick, you know what I mean? Like everybody kind of knows that rep. That's not really the situation there. And there's certainly no Tom Brady treatment being given to Jaden Daniels here in Washington. Then you go to Denver, and really Denver was all about, all right, we've got this extremely dominant defense, and then we've got this quarterback that, again, kind of has the Tom Brady treatment. He does pretty much whatever he wants to do, and everybody's in lockstep behind him. It's almost like the offensive coordinator and coach work for the quarterback. It worked there, for at least one championship, and that's great. Then you go to San Francisco, and things are kind of a little bit different as well, where Kyle Shanahan is certainly the man in charge, but he also has these coaches that obviously have minds of their own, help craft the schemes. Defensive coordinators are kind of left to do what they want to do, and they're really building quarterbacks and not relying on, we've got this Hall of Fame franchise leader in place. We're going to go through several different quarterbacks, but we're going to make it work with all of them. So I think what AP has really done is learned the ups and downs and benefits to all of it, right? Player-led efforts, player-led PR campaigns, coach-led efforts, and really been able to marry all those styles into his own, which is very trusting, very much wanting to make sure that no one person is a single point of failure in the operation. That goes to his front office, right? Keeping Martin Mayhew, bringing in Lance Newmark. Like AP is very much not a one-man show himself. And I think when you have a team that doesn't have a single point of failure, that is when you can get the most consistency out of a winning process.
David, the first 5-6 games of the season, Brian Robinson Jr. was leading the league in yards after contact. It has just been Jaden Daniels as the running game for like the last month of the season.
Yeah.
Do you have a finger on what is going on there with the run game?
I mean, I think a little bit of it is fatigue. You know what I mean? Like at the same time when Brian Robinson was leading the league in rushing, I remember going in the locker rooms after games. I mean, those old linemen were just tanked, man. I mean, just left it all out on the field, which is exactly what you want, right? But eventually that's going to take its toll on anybody. Injuries have certainly started to kind of, be a factor. Tyler Biadasz has suffered multiple. Andrew Wiley has suffered multiple. Brandon Coleman is playing through some bruises and bumps. And, everybody is. But when you have an offensive line that was kind of already giving so much, now they're starting to also get wounded in the process. I think it's kind of a natural part of the process. You also have the defenses in the NFL getting used to the scheme and understanding what the reads are and how to react to it. So there's that part of it. Brian Robinson has suffered 3 injuries to his right leg alone this season. So who knows how much that's really hampering him. He's never going to let us know that. But, I think it's just all kind of come together. And, when I see Brian Robinson run right now, man, like honestly, I see a back who's not necessarily fully confident. And I don't know if it's a lack of confidence in what they're doing play-wise and, hey, the defense has got us figured out. We need to change it up and we're not. I don't know if it's a lack of confidence in the O-line, his own leg, like I said, with his injury, or it's just a combination of all of it, honestly. And I think that's probably the most likely answer is he's frustrated because the defense is getting more penetration than usual. He's frustrated because the offensive line isn't getting as much push as usual, and he doesn't feel right because he's been dealing with all these injuries all year. I think it's probably all of that stuff combined. But yeah, man, early in the season, you would never expect Jaden Daniels as this team's leading rusher by the end of the regular season, but that's exactly what it is. The good news is Jaden has really grown into his role as being the leader on the offense.
It's interesting when they started the season out, and I never thought I'd say this now, but they were running the 2 left tackles. They were Brandon Coleman and
Cornelius Lucas.
Thank you. We're splitting, and I that was shocked then. It feels like maybe they were better off when they were doing that. I'm curious your thoughts on that. It was so odd, and I'm surprised I'm saying this now, but the numbers kind of just support that they were better off switching back and forth at left tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I can't deny that thought, or I can't lie and say that thought hasn't crossed my mind, as well. At this stage in the process, like I don't think anybody's really asked Dan Quinn or Cliff Kingsbury that question, because I think at this point in the process, while we may out here talk about some of these things, we're not really in the position where we're going to ask the coaches, like, why are you playing this guy versus not this guy? Early in the season, we asked, why isn't Derek Forrest getting reps? Why isn't this guy getting reps? We asked, why isn't Chris Rodriguez getting more reps? And I know people are still kind of talking about some of these things on the outside. Certainly makes a lot of sense, but we know what they're going to say. We're going to play the best guys, give us the best chance to win every single week, no matter what. And that's the answer they should give. Cornelius Lucas has also been banged up himself. I don't know how much of that kind of plays into it. Either would like to see them use more eligible, linemen. I know Trent Scott has been using that as well. This team, I think, still chip blocks as well, more than probably most teams in the NFL does. But I've noticed, I haven't counted, but to me it seems like, so I feel like, I guess, as I watch the tape, that there's less chip blocking going on here in the last month of the season. I don't really know what the purpose behind that would be, other than maybe they just want to get as many receivers open as possible as or downfield as possible, as they realize the defenses are kind of adjusting to Jaden's play style. But I think what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers kind of exposed last week is you have some teams that are just going to blitz you because that's their style. Like, everybody knows and turns on the tape and says, look, most of the defenses that actually had success against Jaden Daniels, defenses like the Eagles and things like that, actually haven't brought a lot of pressure. They kept more defenders in the field to close throwing windows, but also be able to pursue him. But some of these coaches, like Todd Bowles, they're just going to blitz the crap out of you because that's who they are. And they know the numbers, they understand the tape, but they're going to be who they are. They're not going to change their stripes. I think Aaron Glenn is going to do the same thing. The Detroit Lions, I expect, are going to bring a lot of pressure at Jaden Daniels. They're going to play a lot of man coverage like they have all season long, and it's going to be on that O-line to protect Jaden, give him the opportunity to escape or find an open throwing lane. But those chip blocks can help. Though we didn't see as many against the Buccaneers, I think we'll see more against the Detroit Lions. You may even see a little bit of that tackle rotation, or at least eligible tackles to help out in the blocking scheme. Hopefully we see some of those things, because I don't know that you can survive another week kind of just letting Jaden withstand the pass rush.
You mentioned their man defense there. That will be interesting. I think that will be one of the big storylines this weekend, is if Tyrion Arnold is matched up on Dami Brown one-on-one. That I think Dami Brown is the winner in that matchup. It's funny to say this, David. Before the season started, you would have never thought this. It feels like Dami is a much sign, particularly if Cliff's back in this kind of offense. They have used him really well, and really they have never kind of had they have had that kind of deep threat because Jam has already been on the team, but him across from Terry, I think you're kind of getting the idea of what he can do to drag things away from Terry. I think he's got to get re-signed.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see Dami back, and I really have enjoyed watching the progression of Dami Brown. It really goes back to the preseason. Even I remember, I was on a show. I don't remember which one, but I was on a show and we talked about the receivers that we thought might stay on this roster. And unfortunately, at the time, I actually left Dami Brown off of my active roster. Now, this was pre-Jahan Dotson trade, so we're talking early preseason that we were talking about this. Once Jahan was traded, it's kind of like, okay, now Dami obviously has a spot. But the concern with Dami is a lot of his big plays in the past had come because of defensive miscues, whether it was a defender falling or a defender not rolling over, whatever it was, the defender made the mistake. It wasn't Dami making the situation, creating the opportunity. Now he took advantage of it, which is fantastic. But you wanted to see him be more of a creator. That's where Terry McLaurin becomes one of the better receivers in the league, is he can create opportunities for his quarterback to fit the ball in as well, and then obviously make the amazing catches that he does. This year, when I go back to that one play that everybody remembers from the preseason with Dami Brown against the New York Jets, that is a play where there's a 4-level process in there, from the release to the stem to the break to the way he tracks the ball, bends into the defender away from the ball to make sure that he gets that last second opportunity to reach over for that football. And I remember talking to Dami about it, and I asked him, I was like, that's something that honestly I don't think I've seen a lot on your tape. He said, no, you haven't. He's like, it's something that I've been working on a lot, and it just really worked perfectly there. And obviously that's kind of like, is that a sign of things to come? And I think it didn't show up necessarily early in the season, a whole lot, but now it's starting to really showcase itself. And I've had a lot of interesting conversations with Dami that I'm going to keep off the air, just because you never know who's listening. And I don't need Terry and Arnold stumbling upon me saying something he uses against Dami, but the cerebral part of the game that Dami is really starting to tap into is quite impressive. And I think it's sparking a lot of that growth. Now, there's some tough decisions coming. Like Olamide Zaccheaus has had an impact. Jamison Crowder is obviously a franchise favorite and has his impact on special teams as well. Noah Brown, once his health comes back, like what do you do with him? Luke McCaffrey obviously is going to have a spot here. Teams don't get rid of their own rookies, and they like him as a long-term project. So he's going to have a spot here. And you got the NFL draft. You got receiver talent coming out in April. So where do you go there? And then obviously free agency. I know a lot of people are going to want T. Higgins. I don't see that happening, but people are going to want him. So, there's a lot of decisions to make here, and a couple of moves. Dami can find himself being like the number 5 receiver. You know what I mean? And if his agent sees that on the horizon, he might tell him, hey, dude, like, I know you love this place, had some success, but it's best if we take your career year and go try to find you a place where maybe you can fight for that number 3 or number 4 instead of here we were fighting for number 5. So we'll see how AP addresses the offseason. That's going to be a big part of it. But I would love to see Dami back.
Another guy that I'd like to see back is Ertz. He's been on a heater the last 5 or 6 weeks. There's nothing better for a quarterback, and you know this, than a security blanket. And he has been absolutely that every time they need something, whether it's a 4th down play, a big shot in the end zone. He has been there. I'm sure Jaden would love to have him back. They've only got one tight end on the roster next year that they're paying. So I mean, they've got to bring some guys in. What is it about Ertz? He's already been to playoffs. He's been to Super Bowls. He's got touchdowns in the Super Bowls. What has he brought to this team that maybe the average fan doesn't realize?
I mean, obviously the leadership is there. Obviously the coach in the room is there, but I think he is kind of the embodiment of this organization. Honestly, like he is kind of, if you had to pick a person who reflects what's happened with Washington this year, it's Zach Ertz, because he gets released from Arizona last season, goes on the market. Nobody really, hunts him down. He ends up on the Detroit Lions practice squad, never takes an active rep for the Lions before the end of the season. And he's kind of goes into limbo and says, I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my NFL career. It might be over. It might not be over. Basically said, look, I'm looking for the right situation, not looking for the money, not looking for the paycheck, not even going out there and ring hunting, to be quite honest with you. Because what he's told us is, he didn't fit in Arizona. After Cliff Kingsbury left, he didn't fit in Arizona. He didn't fit what they wanted to do. It kind of reminds me of Austin Eckler. The Chargers had a very open conversation with him during this offseason. They said, here's what we want. He said, I can't bring you that. So if I can't bring you that, that's what you need. Let's just call it done, and we'll go our separate ways, and good luck to both of us. And that's exactly what the Chargers did. So Zach Ertz, when Cliff Kingsbury came back to the NFL, said, like, that's my perfect opportunity to get back in. Underdog, right? Like I've admitted over and over again, I'll continue to admit, because it's the only way to do things. I was kind of like, all right, I've already seen Logan Thomas try to come out here and run these routes on an NFL field. I don't need to see that again. First time I saw Zach Ertz on the field, I said, who's this rookie? And I didn't actually say, who's this rookie? But like, that's how young he looked in the beginning of the season. And he's been fortunate enough to be able to avoid injury. And he's been, really diligent in his rehab. I mean, I've never seen as much ice packed on a dude immediately after a game as I've seen on Zach Ertz. So if he wants to play again, especially if Cliff is still here, but even if Cliff isn't still here, there's I've got to believe that there's plans in place to kind of continue the offensive momentum, even if it's not the exact same scheme, at least some of the same tenets. And Zach Ertz certainly fits that. Now, if Cliff goes somewhere else and Zach wants to play, probably a good chance that Zach follows Cliff. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'd love to see Zach back. If Zach retires, I mean, I'd love, and I don't know if Zach's interested in this, so this is just me spitballing, but I'd love to see him come on as an assistant tight ends coach underneath David Rye. You know what I mean? If he wants to get into that realm. Not all players want to be coaches, but yeah, it's been a joy getting to know Zach a little bit from a media player standpoint. You know what I mean? And just watching him play, man, has been amazing, because I never expected what he's been able to do.
Marshon Lattimore, is the hammy not exactly right, or he's just not in the game? Like just doesn't have the win yet. I mean, he's had a couple weeks off.
It's game shape.
Some of both, or what do you think that is more likely?
I mean, I think the hamstring is as fine as it can be, right? I got told a long time ago that when someone has a hamstring injury like that, it really takes about 3 months for the hamstring to quote unquote heal. So until that guy gets 3 months to not have to go out there and do all the things that they do with their lower body, he's never going to be 100%. But as best as you could be in the NFL season after having that type of injury, I think he's there. I think a lot of it is game conditioning, which you only get by playing football. And some of it is the instincts. You know what I mean? You got to get your instincts back, get your win back. Cause we all know this, like, think about the activity you do the best. Maybe it's shooting, maybe it's cooking, maybe it's reading a book. I don't know what it is, but whatever the activity is that you do the best in your off time, well, now put your heart rate at about 140 beats per minute and you're out of breath and try to do it. It's not going to be as easy to do it. So that's just the bottom line of it. Joe Witt Jr. saying this week that he got all of the full speed practices all of the full practice participation. That's going to help him a lot. So I do expect you're going to see a better version of Marshon than you saw last week against Mike Evans. But I also don't think he was terrible last week. I just think,
I didn't either.
he's a rusty cornerback going up against a Hall of Fame receiver, you know what I mean, who very much so wanted to go out there and embarrass him on national television. So I think Marshon's going to be just fine.
They're obviously not adding any new players to the defensive line. So what is it that they can do to stop down what to me is the most important part of the game? I mean, David Montgomery back and Jahmyr Gibbs will rip your heart out every chance he gets with the ball. What does this defense do to stop the run, which has not been easy for them this year?
Yeah, I would say if you can't make the big play, at least be in the right spot. You know what I mean? Like if you're supposed to be filling the A gap, don't get pushed out of it. You know what I mean? If you're supposed to be containing on the edge, don't break down and give up a soft edge. If you can't make the big play, at least, be where you're supposed to be so that maybe those second and third level guys can come in and clean that up for you. It's going to be interesting to see because, you go back to like the Philadelphia Eagles matchups and Joe Witt Jr. kind of referenced making some changes in how they attacked the run game with their defensive front. He didn't say specifics. What I saw and what I believe I saw was, when they first went up against the Eagles, they tried to do a lot of hold the point of attack. Defensive line, just hold your spot, keep your gaps, keep your gap discipline and let the second level defenders come in and clean it up that way without being overly aggressive and perhaps over pursuing the run. Later in the second half in that first game against the Eagles, and I know that it bit him in the butt a little bit with those 2 touchdown runs by Saquon. But then in the second game specifically, it was more about the front line trying to get early penetration, get off the ball as quick as you can. Second level defenders then kind of not necessarily shooting your gaps, but just kind of look and see where the run flow is going to go and attack it and swarm around the ball carrier and get him. And I think that's really where they can go. Like I think Daron Payne, John Allen, Johnny Newton, Sheldon Day, those interior defensive linemen, they're at their best when they can just fire out of the blocks and be as aggressive as they possibly can, create a little bit of havoc. And then those edge guys and those second level defenders, even third level guys like Jeremy Chin, you've got to be on it. Again, see ball, get ball, click and close, whatever cliche you want to use from football, that's going to be the key. So that's what I would like to see them do against the Detroit Lions. Don't be passive and try to wait for Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery to run into your defender. Go after and get them and try to create some chaos. Unfortunately, it's probably going to lead to a couple of guys out of place here and there and some explosives. The key is don't let those explosives turn into touchdowns and you'll be able to survive.
The over-under on this game is set at 55.5 right now. You like the over or the under in this one?
I'm going to go the under, honestly, because I think both of these offenses are incredibly dynamic. So both of these offenses are also going to look to hold the ball as long as possible. I don't think either coach is going to get super conservative, but, first of all, the Detroit Lions are a run-first team anyway. So if Danny Campbell can play it from ahead and his offensive staff can play it from ahead and Ben Johnson can call plays, with a lead, then they're gonna bleed that clock and create a running clock situation. And Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury, we've already seen it. You just saw it last week. We've seen it multiple times during the season. They can get a 6-7 minute drive that produces points. They're going to take that every single time. So this could be one of those games. I think usually you see about 12 possessions per team in an NFL game. I think this one you might come down to like 10. You know what I mean? Which doesn't seem like too many less, but that's 4 possessions in total for the game. So I think this is going to be a little bit of a reduced game from that. But at the same time, both these teams have the ability to just throw haymakers, and we might have a couple 4-play drives that take up 1 minute, 13 seconds and end in the end zone. So I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I expect them, if they have the opportunity to ground the game, run the clock, that each side is going to have an interest in doing it. So I'm going to go with the over just because that minimizes, the opportunities.
And the spread the last time I looked was 9, which feels awfully high. You taking the points?
Yeah, so the spread at FanDuel is 9.5. I'm definitely, I'm down with taking Washington with those 9.5 points. Like if you're gonna spot me 9.5 points, I'll definitely take it. But I will tell you, in my mind, there's three results Saturday night. There's a Lions blowout win, which obviously nobody wants on this side of things. There's a Lions close win, and there's a Commanders close win. I don't see the Commanders blowing this Lions team out, just because of how good the Lions are. But the good news is there are 2/3 of those options are close games either way, no matter which way it goes, which means you take the points.
Davey, you're heading out soon. Have a safe flight and enjoy the game, buddy.
Yeah.
Thank you for the time today.
Appreciate you. Thank you for the invite.